Did our fearless leader just get caught bombing one of our allies?
With regard to Nord Stream 2, we continue to have very strong and clear conversations with our German allies, and I want to be clear with you today. If Russia invades Ukraine, one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward.
Guys, that was an old clip to kind of remind you that, yes, many of us kind of sort of knew this was coming, and a lot of us kind of knew that this actually happened. A lot of us, of course, knew that old Joe or Sleepy Joe or wherever you might want to call him, or Obama, was going to do something stupid like this. Now, guys, you're probably thinking to yourself, this was obviously planned, and I agree, it obviously was. But let us not forget that things do not ever go according to plan. Now, guys, this video right here is going to be simply on short timer prepping. The reason why is because short timer prepping is going to be the reactions and what's going on in the world itself channel as far as foreign policy and military stuff is concerned. Now, guys, we're going to be looking at something from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters because they provided some pretty good commentary on this, and I'm going to be commentating on their commentary. So make sure you guys stick around for the full video. This is going to be a relatively lengthy one, which, by the way, the videos are going to be much, much lengthier on this channel going forward, at least for the time being. The thing that you have to understand is that these people have been trying to do this whole green energy thing for a while, and they're using the war with Russia to kind of accelerate, especially on the world level. However, what these people don't seem to understand is that they are out of touch with the populace that's there. Now, guys, this right here could be a very, 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 and I mean very large political disaster, not just for Germany, but also for the United States. Now, guys, let me go ahead and say this really quick. There is one country right now that nobody is considering or thinking about. It's the country of Poland. Poland, as you guys know, sits in between Germany and Russia both. Poland ideologically aligns more with Russia, but yet economically it aligns more with Germany. And I think that they realize at this moment in time it might not be a good idea to get into a war with Russia at this moment in time because economically they're still relying on oil for the most part. Don't let them fool you. People are still driving around in cars. They're not exactly adopting the green energy the way people want them to adopt it. Now, guys, Biden in his State of the Union address did say that he wanted 10 more years of oil, which, by the way, kind of tells me that maybe this plan may have already backfired. These people are not exactly what we call smart. They're out of touch, they fuck up, and then they turn right back right after the screw up, and they realize, holy crap, what the hell did we do? Well, this right here is something that, quite frankly, is probably got these people crapping themselves behind closed doors. Now, with that right there being said, let's get to the video. Of course, it's going to be roughly right around 22 or 23 minutes. If there are any sudden jumps, that means that there was an ad involved. Yes, I'm a cheap ass. I'm not a member. I'm not a YouTube premium member. And we're going to come back on the flip side and provide some additional commentary, and that's how this video is going to go. So let's go ahead and get back. Or any noticeable jumps, that is because an ad occurred. I talked about that before the video really started to kick in, but this is very important because not only does this set up a couple of very pivotal events, but this also puts us in, let's just put it this way here. I'm not a fan of supporting NATO anymore, especially given the fact that NATO is kind of sort of like pretending that they're America's tax obligation. However, this right here was obviously not a very smart decision at this moment in time. If you're going to cut ties with somebody, which obviously this was planned by Germany and America, at least as far as it's obvious to me. The thing is this right here, you need to do it, you need to wean off slowly if you're going to do this. Now, I don't think this was Biden's intention. However, when something like this gets out, you're probably going to get some extreme ire from the German people. And trust me, German politicians will fill it at the ballot box. Now, I know somebody's going to say, look, this right here may, let's just say the R word may be in play when it comes to Germany. However, it's not as simple as you think. I think 2016 here was like that. It just had to be that, let's just say the opposition or the side that we've been choosing or the side that I'm on just happened to win. Nothing is impossible. I just want to go ahead and throw that out there. But let's go ahead and respond to this.
Eastern Ukraine, who tried to have autonomous regions. That's really the origins of it. So the planning of this pipeline destruction occurred months before the normies think that there was anything to even consider in any of this.
We know there have been long-running interests in Ukraine as well. I covered this last week with Dominique. When Obama was still a junior senator from Chicago, he was one of two American senators going over to Ukraine to investigate Soviet former bioweapons labs.
Oh, quite.
Why was junior Chicago Senator Barack Obama who had no foreign policy experience whatsoever, going and wandering around Ukraine bioethics labs, which then were invested in by Hunter Biden's investment firm.
Yeah.
Very
Well,
odd.
and of course, Biden, I mean, he made numerous trips out to the Ukraine. For a relatively minor country, it got a lot of attention from the US elites. Very, very suspicious that. And
Really quick, if you didn't already know, Joe Biden was basically given the task of Russia when he was vice president. He had also been caught on camera. I'll try to find that particular speech, and I'll try to put it in this video, or I will be trying to put it in the description box, either one, where he commented on Russia and this exact moment here. The problem is it has not exactly worked out the way he thought it was going to work out. That little ordeal was back from the 1990s. So it makes you wonder if this entire thing was, let's just say, pre-planned as far back as the 90s, but obviously things are not working out the way you might would think, or at least it's not working out the way we thought it was going to work out.
this article goes some way to explaining why that is. So, Hirsch talks about December 2021, Jake Sullivan convened a meeting of a newly formed task force. Men and women from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, the State and Treasury Departments, and they asked for recommendations that they could put to the president. It would be the first of a series of top secret meetings in a secure room on the top floor of the old executive building adjacent to the White House that was also the home of the president's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. Over the next several meetings, the participants debated options for an attack. The Navy proposed using a submarine. The Air Force discussed dropping bombs with delayed fuses. The CIA argued that whatever was done, it would have to be covert. Everybody involved understood the stakes. This is not kiddie stuff, the source said. If the attack was traceable to the United States, this is an act of war. Yes. Yes, this is an act of war. This is an act of war on crucial German energy infrastructure. It is an act of war on the German economy. Germany, just remind ourselves, is a NATO member, and the Biden regime committed an act of war against the German economy, against the German people.
Well, there's also something else too to consider. Germany at this moment in time, and I do agree with him. This right was an act of war, whether they want to actually say that it is or not. The thing is this right here, and I've said this in a couple of videos, especially on the Claymore channel, that we're living in a state of false confidence. We're living in a state of how do I say? I think right now what's going on is that we're kind of huffing our own farts, hence the whole wokeness thing, hence the whole stuff that's going on with the military with pronouns and things of that nature there. We think because we're mostly a technological military that we can do stuff like this and can't be touched. We're also putting a lot of faith in our borders, where we're at in the world. The problem with this is that anytime you live in a world of false confidence, which, by the way, will be coming up again here in a second, the problem with that is that at some point in time, somebody is eventually going to hit you in the face. Now, right now, Russia can't really do that unless they do it nuclear-wise. They can't really do it with their actual military. They couldn't take us in a conventional war. They couldn't take us in a conventional war anywhere except maybe on the Russian continent, which I would highly advise against because, well, it didn't work out well for Napoleon. It didn't work out very well for Hitler. I just wouldn't try to do that. Maybe in Europe, possibly, but still at the same time, though, Russia is still very, very much a nuclear power. And they also have a massive natural gas and a massive oil reserve. They're also investing heavily in metals. This is one of the reasons why I think that Russia, if you're not careful, Russia could find themselves in a situation where they have no choice but to lean into their military. And next thing you know, that military could get a lot larger someday. Same thing with China. And of course, if you guys saw my video on the central countries and you see the actual railway that's going through, they're talking about Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all those countries there. They're not going to need Germany. They're not going to need Germany. As a matter of fact, if all those countries work together, they're not going to need Europe at all. This is a problem for the United States later on because at this moment in time, the current regime that we have in charge is trying to aim towards a globalistic regime. So this is very problematic for them going in the future, especially if they, let's just say if Germany is taking Russian oil, we would probably need Germany in that area, especially seeing how we have bases. And I think that what's going to end up happening as a result of this is that Germany at some point in time is eventually going to find itself reliant on Germany. You see, you just did this, but in reality, what you may have done, you just did this to try to get your green energy agenda and to try to get Germany away from there, from Russia. The problem is that these people don't live in reality. They live in an extreme state of false confidence. And they don't seem to realize that Russia is putting itself in a position where they don't really truly need anybody. But at the same time, though, Germany is going to rely on someone, and right now their hope is to rely on the United States. However, keep that word, keep that phrase, false confidence, keep that in mind, because there is something towards the end of this video that, quite frankly, a lot of people who are watching this may have picked up on, and some, of course, may not have, but don't worry, I'll say it towards the end of the video.
The story continues. CIA Director William Burns authorized an agency working group whose members included people familiar with the Navy's deep-sea divers in Panama City. Over the next few weeks, members of CIA's working group began to craft plans for a covert operation that would use deep-sea divers and trigger an explosion on the pipeline. Hearst explains, talking to its source, throughout all of this scheming, the source said, some working guys in the CIA and State Department were saying, don't do this. It's stupid and it's a political nightmare if it comes out. Now, I'm next going to show you a clip that you've probably seen before, but you're probably going to get a slightly different perspective on it. Now, this is in early February, so we're still about a month away from when the normies believe that this war started. Now, having heard everything that I've just told you, and knowing that that Biden has been regularly updated on the progress of this working group, where they're discussing how they're going to get this job done. Remember, this is before the war. Biden went into a press conference with the German Chancellor, and when asked about the Nord Stream pipeline, he said this.
The first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Yeah, it gives a different spin.
Okay, now let me go ahead and state the obvious. I said this in the earlier portion of the video. I'm going to come back to this now, before we get back to the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. There is a country that is a U.S. ally that sits between Germany and Russia. It is a country that was invaded by Germany in 1939. And then another half of the country was occupied by the Soviet Union, or the country of Russia, under Stalin. That country is called Poland. It is a very strategic ally. This idiot has just put us in a situation where Poland, one of our allies, is caught between two stools. That stool is Russia, and that stool is Germany. They economically align more with Germany, but they ideologically align more with Russia, whether you want to believe it or not. You have made this entire ordeal. You have put Poland in a position where they may have to join with other countries someday, like Kaliningrad, or Estonia, or Latvia, or Lithuania. And don't worry, like I said before, that little phrase that I mentioned, false confidence, will come back later on, because it is actually in your Bible. It is the word batosh, meaning false confidence. I'll leave a lecture from Chuck Missler in the description box of this video. Like I said before, I very rarely touch on Bible prophecy because I want to try to prep people for what is to come. I haven't been doing that as much on this channel, and the videos are obviously going to be a little bit longer and a little bit more in essay and reactionary form. But still, at the same time, though, this is a problem. This is a serious problem. This jackass has just put us in a situation where Russia is now going to be emboldened to try to annex those other countries, which are U.S. allies. All right? That is the problem here.
When you know the background planning that was going on behind that. Now, at first, when he said that, that caused absolute dismay amongst the working group and within the CIA. But smarter heads realised that had actually given them an opportunity, because as Hearst explains, the plan to blow up Nord Stream 1 and 2 was suddenly downgraded from a covert operation that would have required that Congress be formally notified to a highly classified intelligence operation. And under US law, there was no longer a legal requirement to report the operation to Congress.
There's also the fact that even though most presidents have done military action outside the purview of Congress, Congress are meant to be the only body which can declare an act of war. So taking it out of Congress's hands means that this can't be legally challenged as an act of war against either Russia or Germany.
Because that was
Exactly. We'll hop more on this in a second.
before we understood this, before we got these revelations, the question was always, well, somebody in Congress would have been informed, and surely somebody would have spoken out against some aspect of this. But that explains it, how Congress were kept out of the loop. Hearst then goes on for much of the rest of the article. He then talks about how the Norwegians basically helped the US with the planning process, how this deep sea diving team, relocated.
Convenient, considering the fact that a lot of Scandinavian nations have suddenly decided to apply for NATO status. I just find it very weird, the timing of all this.
To a base, I think it was a US base. The US, I believe, had a submarine base out in Norway, and they worked to come various technical challenges. Hearst explains, and I won't cover much of this, but Hearst explains in one section, the Norwegians also had a solution to the crucial question of when the operation should take place. Every June for the last 21 years, the American Sixth Fleet had sponsored a major NATO exercise in the Baltic Sea involving scores of Allied ships. The Norwegians proposed that this would be the ideal cover to plant the mines. The Americans provided one vital element. They convinced the Sixth Fleet planners to add a research and development exercise to the programme. It would involve NATO teams of divers placing mines, with competing teams using the latest underwater technology to find and destroy them. So, perfect cover, went in under this. Right, the article then explains that Biden started to dither because he thought it would be a bit obvious if it happened straight away, and he wanted to add a way of basically triggering these at a later date. So then there's a whole bunch of detail about how they did that. And I'm just going to skip to the last thing that I want to mention from this article. On September 26, 2022, a Navy plane made a seemingly routine flight and dropped off a sonar buoy. A few hours later, a high-powered C4 explosive triggered, and 3 of the 4 pipelines were put out of commission. So I'll leave the article for there, and then we can just sort of think about, the fallout from these revelations, because Germany's ruling party have basically ignored this story. I don't think they know what to say about this. The German media is either discrediting or, again, simply ignoring it. Those German media that are covering this story are basically saying that it can't be true because if it was, it would be helpful to Russia, and therefore it must be a lie. That is the narrative that they're going with. And look, you can understand why, because this would be an absolute political disaster for the German government that have aligned itself so heavily with the Biden war against Russia.
It would also be an extreme political disaster here in the United States. You see, guys, right now we got this train crisis in East Palestine, Ohio. The Biden administration, they had ignored this thing for about 6 or 7 days, basically 2 weeks. Then Trump, all of a sudden, in the middle of nowhere, says he's going to go, and next thing you know, the Biden administration says, okay, we'll direct FEMA over there. This is happening. You've got these balloon issues, shooting down certain objects across our airspace, and now you've got this here, which, by the way, many of us suspected that it was us who actually did the pipeline bombing. This is a political disaster for him. It shows him to be extremely incompetent. It also shows him to be untrustworthy. But then again, at the same time, though, I would argue that the vast majority of leadership in Europe, Macron, of course, England, I would argue that most of these people are completely untrustworthy, and it's another reason why I think at this moment in time we need to reconsider our alliance with NATO, or at least a few countries. Now, this being a political disaster for Germany, let's think about this for a second. Let's say that this information does get out, which, by the way, it's already starting to get out. Let's say this information gets out, and there are midterm elections. You see people like crazy vote for opposition party, the party that wants peace, or the party that knows that Russia needs to supply them oil. Because let's be honest, green energy is a bunch of bullshit. Let's just go ahead and say it. It's a bunch of crap. If you want to do electric cars or whatnot, that's fine. And by the way, I'm not completely against green energy. I'm not. I just said it was bullshit, yeah, but I'm not completely against it. If you can come up with alternatives to gas and oil, go right ahead and do that. However, you cannot, under any circumstances, switch over to it at this moment in time. Europe can't do it either. You see, I personally think as much as I dislike Russia, as much as I dislike Putin, or as much as I distrust Putin, I understand that Putin could actually be a very, very powerful ally in the region if we actually have an actual honest-to-God dialogue. Russia can't take us in a fight. They're never going to be able to. But what Russia can do is eventually, slowly but surely, take over that entire region of Asia and even parts of Eastern Europe. Now, I kept on bringing up the phrase false confidence. Now, why in the world did I bring up false confidence? Because there's a certain passage in your Bible, the Magog invasion, which is Ezekiel 38:39, and it mentions Gomer and his bands. Gomer and his bands is oftentimes thought of to be one of two people. Now, like I said, if you want to leave a comment in the comment section, we can have that dialogue. That's fine with me. However, here's the problem. Many believe that Gomer and his bands is actually Germany and the nations along the Danube River. I even did a video on this. My feeling is this right here. If this situation goes completely hot, and let's just say you have a political disaster, Germany's next federal elections is in 2025, you could see the opposition party, or you could see a massive split in the vote, an anti-war vote, which could send Germany right to Russia, which, by the way, also reminds me of something that Trump had said, which, by the way, we're going to get to here in a second. But, gang, this right here is where I'm going to leave this portion of the video off. Now, before we go any further, I want you to see exactly how it was that John Kirby responded when he was pressed by an actual journalist.
Army is at NATO's doorstep is because NATO has expanded rather than the Russians expanding? That, in other words, NATO has moved closer to Russia rather than Russia moving closer to NATO. Is that not an accurate way to look at this?
I think that's the way President Putin probably looks at it. It's certainly not the way that we look at it.
You don't think that NATO has expanded eastward toward Russia?
NATO has expanded,
Okay.
and the expansion has been a good thing for.
So the reason that the Russian army is at NATO's doorstep is not the fault of the Russian army, it's not the Russian army that's done it. It's NATO has moved closer to moved
I'm pretty
east.
sure it wasn't NATO who was ordering, upwards of 15 battalion tactical groups to within 10 kilometers of the border with Ukraine, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't NATO who put little green men inside Ukraine to destabilize eastern
I'm
cities.
pretty sure that Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So unless that's changed,
It's not
Okay.
changed, but I'm
So,
pretty sure the movement by Russia is
has
Russia's
NATO
decision.
if NATO is moved east, the reason that the Russian army is closer or on NATO's doorstep is because NATO moved, not
NATO
because
is not an anti-Russia alliance. NATO is a security alliance.
Unfortunately, for 50 years it was an anti-Soviet alliance. So
Where's
do you
the
not
Soviet
understand
Union
it? So do you not understand how, or can you not even see how the Russians will perceive it as a threat, and the fact that it keeps getting closer to their border while their troops, I mean, the places where their troops are, you say their troops are, and may have been in Ukraine and Georgia, are not NATO members.
I'm not going to pretend to know what goes in President Putin's mind or Russian military commanders. I mean, I barely got a history degree at the University of South Florida. What I can tell you is that NATO is a defensive alliance. It remains a defensive
Fair
alliance.
enough, but it has moved east, correct? I mean, that's just a
It
fact.
has expanded, absolutely.
Right, exactly.
But
And so
there's
the
no reason
reason-
for anybody to think the expansion is a hostile or threatening move. And we've been saying that throughout the last 15 years, Matt.
It's like you're moving closer to Russia. You're blaming the Russians for being close to NATO.
No.
That's exactly what Hegel
We're
said.
blaming the Russians for violating the territorial integrity of Ukraine and destabilizing the
Okay,
security
which is
situation
not a
inside
NATO
Europe.
member. Which is not a NATO member.
I see to you
Other
on that
countries
point.
feel threatened.
Yeah, you tend to have that happen to you when you get actually pressed for a change. It tells me that this thing is not exactly going the way they thought it was going to go, as they would say. So, yes, it's not just a political disaster. It's not just possibly a foreign policy disaster. It's definitely a political disaster for us. And I did bring up the Gog and Magog thing because, quite frankly, that's pretty much what you just set up. You just set up Germany here in the next 2 or 3 years, possibly trying to join a coalition that, by the way, is going to involve Russia. That's going to involve pretty much all of Eastern Europe. Now, what do I think is going to happen? Well, I don't want to be too drastic and I don't want to make too crazy of predictions, but a big part of me believes that our presence in Germany at some point in time is probably going to shrink. So I want you guys to go ahead and notice that right away, especially if we've got an idiot like this here in office. By the way, I need to go ahead and leave you guys some thoughts on the war in Ukraine. This war is not going the way Ukraine wants, okay? I'm not saying this be pro or anti-Ukraine, but these people want to take back the Crimea, and what they don't seem to realize is that they're about to launch an attack, and what's probably going to look a lot like what Thermopylae Pass was. It's a very, very small area that they're trying to go through. And this right could end very badly for Ukraine. If it were me, if I were Ukraine at this moment in time, I would try to sue for peace. We're also finding out that there was an attempt to try to sue for peace, but somebody decided that they wanted to actually step into there and kind of sort of put the kibosh on that there. So, yeah, it looks like we're headed towards World War III, and I think we may have escalated. Now, guys, really quick, World War III never occurs overnight. World wars themselves don't occur overnight. It occurs over years of mistakes and mishaps and foreign policy disasters and foreign policy, let's just say, attempts at trying to work things out with somebody, but you end up just pissing them off. As I've said before, I still believe that Russia at some point in time is going to lean very, very heavily into their natural resources and, of course, probably their mineral reserve. And they're probably going to join with China at some point in time, or at least the Central Asian nations, which, by the way, is in your Bible. We'll probably talk more about that in future videos. So, guys, I just want to go ahead and throw that out there. Guys, short time of prepping. If you like the content, hit the like button, subscribe, share the video, sign up in the comment section. I want to get you guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys later.
The Petey Winnie arms and the skinny Winnie legs.